polygraph is not a lie detector. It will not tell you whether someone is telling a lie. What it does is enables you to determine whether or not someone is physiologically responding to a stimulus. Did you kill your grandmother? Did you put her grandmother's body in the back of the car? Did you take $100,000 from work? All those issues, if they're relevant and you have done them, is going to create a stimulus in your body. A significant stimulus. I tell you now, when I come home, where have you been? It's 10 o'clock at night. My sympathetic nervous system goes up through the roof. Alright? So here are some issues that we're going to talk about today. Now, part of today is we're going to talk about the polygraph, what the polygraph does. We're also going to look about some issues in relation to paralinguistics, neurolinguistics, looking at somebody and determining whether they're telling you a lie just by the way they're recalling memory, which is what we call a cluster. And I'll talk to you about clusters and determining whether somebody, from their verbal and non-verbal body language back to you, is a high probability that person is either not telling you the truth or is. Now, there are some issues you need to be mindful of. Persons who are left-handed and persons who are right-handed, very important. Cultural aspects, very important. Some cultures will, for instance, when talking to a person in authority, will not look at you in the eye. As Anglo-Saxons, someone who's not looking at you in the eye, what do we automatically think?
Right.
They're not telling us the truth. They've got something to hide. So you need to be very, very informative in relation to cultural aspects and those issues. So today, why would the polygraph come about? Well, you might not know, but for about the last couple hundred years, if not back in 15 BC, they had a simple device to determine whether or not somebody was telling the truth or not. It was run by the local priests. So what would happen is they would send people who was determining whether or not they'd stole bread or stolen money or whatever it might be into a darkened barn. And in that barn, they would have a donkey. And what the priest would say is, you would go into that barn, and if they won't follow you in there, and if the donkey neighs when you pull the tail, you are deceptive. You are telling a lie, and therefore you're a liar and you'll be punished. So your sympathetic nervous system's going up through the roof now. So the issue is, what they would do is people would go into the barn. Now the smart people would do what? Not go near the flaming tail, would they? Right, no one's watching you, no. You're not going to hear it neigh, so I must be telling the truth, and they walk out. And the priest would be standing there and say, okay, how'd you go? Yeah, I pulled the tail and it didn't neigh, I'm telling the truth. Great, show me your hands. Because they would put soot in the tail of the donkey. And if you pulled on the tail of the donkey, what are you going to have on your hands? You're going to have residue of soot. Right? So if you come out and said, I pulled the tail on the donkey as opposed to pin the tail on the donkey, all right, and you had no soot on your hands, what are you? You're a liar. Okay, so these are some of the tests. Unfortunately, there are some religions that had more significant tests that we don't do, thank goodness, in Australia. One of them is, if you stuck your hand into boiling oil and pulled it out and there were no burn marks, you're telling the truth. Okay, thank goodness we don't do that. All right. But these are some of the aspects that they have done in the past in relation to determining whether or not people have been truthful. Even the Chinese. The Chinese would have their own simple methodology of determining somebody's telling the truth. Now, how many of us would be aware of our autonomic nervous systems and how they come into play? Our parasympathetic nervous system, which is actively already recorded in the notes for today, and our sympathetic nervous system. When your sympathetic nervous system comes into play, we call it freeze, fight or flight. Kangaroos do it fantastically. How many of us hit kangaroo on the road? They jump in front of you and they stop, because what they do, and we do the same thing. When we're walking down the road, we see a dog come running at us, we stop. We make an assessment, we either bolt, like I do, or you're going to fight it. That's genetically, that's what we do. So it's freeze, fight or flight. At that time, our sympathetic nervous system... Now, I am going to demonstrate the freeze mode, because I'm frightened about this aggressive dog in front of me. Right? So the issue there is, when our body goes into the sympathetic nervous system activates, what happens is the skin, the blood, goes to the major organs. We immediately start breathing more to get oxygen, give us strength to be able to move quickly. Adrenaline is injected into our bodies, again to give us strength to move very quickly. And our eyes become contracted. so as we can see better. So what happens in all those issues is that our body is now genetically moving into a place and we can move very quickly or fight very quickly. When we're at school and we saw kids fighting and they went pale, it wasn't because they were cowards. It wasn't because they were scared. It's just the body shutting down all the blood to the outside of the skin so as they're in fight mode. And that's what we see. And the same thing happens when we talk to people in relation to reading their verbal, non-verbal and the polygraph. Okay, and we'll talk about that today. So the polygraph instrumentation that we have here is called a mobile unit. We have Advanced Polygraph has a $100,000 laboratory which has been built. It currently, in that laboratory, does have 3 rooms. It has an outside monitor about a quarter of the size of what you see here, with an examiner monitoring people's expressions in relation to what's going on now. There are 6 cameras in the suite. Right here there are 1. One camera focused solely on facial expression, and the changes of micro and facial expression. The second camera, which is located here, is on body language, so we see the whole of the body. Now, the reason for that is that the examiner who's undertaken the examination comes through the feet. So if somebody who wants to be deceptive, they come in and they undertake what they call a series of countermeasures. They bring in, they put deodorant on the fingers, so the galvanic skin response detectors won't pick them up. Okay? They deliberately pull them off, such as what we've just demonstrated, so as the polygraph will not be able to pick it up. They come in and they put nails and tacks in their shoes. So everyone who undertakes a polygraph examination does so on bare feet. All right? So, and the ultimate one is, you're booked in for a polygraph examination and you come in and do it in his place and say you're him. So a polygraph examination is never undertaken with anyone unless they produce photographic identification, because you do send your mates in. Alright? So if you're talking about sending a mate in relation to, did you steal the next door neighbour's car? Well, your mate didn't do it because you did, and he's sitting in your place. So you see that's how the polygraph works, and we're very live to those issues, and they're called countermeasures, and you cover off. Okay. The second chart you'll see down here is what you're actually looking at here, which is, there's only 2 instruments that are working at the moment on this one, and I'll pump it up shortly for the others. There's the pneumograph, which is what these are here. Now, one is measured above the heart, one below the heart. What it does is measures changes in respiration. Because when our sympathetic nervous system kicks into place, this is the body talking to you, okay? Because we're nervous about a stimulus. The stimulus is, did you? We go, the next thing we do, because you can't stop it, is we go, and our blink rate increases to blazes. So a normal blink rate may be 1 to every 7 seconds. When you see the blink rate change to 1 to every 3 seconds, as Ceri and I were talking about before, together with pupil dilation, what that means is they're either in a state of nervousness or they're feeling attracted to you. Okay? We discussed that and it was a state of nervousness. So these are some of the issues that the body will talk to you about, but you need to be mindful of how to read them. Okay. So what we have here is a mobile unit. We have 1 camera. We have a polygraph machine, which is a laptop computer with software on it. We have the pneumographs, which measure respiration and increases of respiration, which is very important. We have a galvanic skin response. Now what the galvanic skin response detectors do is they measure increases of perspiration. Because if you're suddenly frightened by a stimulus and your sympathetic nervous system kicks into place, as some of you probably just did then, and I can tell by the water trickling out of the door, the issue is you exhibit small amounts of perspiration. You can't stop it. This puts small impulses of electricity through your body, and we actually can recall it and see it. So there's a stimulus that takes place, and there is an issue. As you see the galvanic skin response detector there. In this particular place, he's not concerned about anything. In fact, he's very relaxed. I can change that later on. However, in this particular regard, he's got small amounts of, as I said before, electrical impulses going through the body to measure increases of perspiration. The final one that we have on this particular unit is the blood pressure. You've got to remember, with the polygraph, they're all medical instruments. Polygraph only uses medical instrumentation. And what this is doing is picking up pulse rate, heart rate, and those kinds of issues. The other device we use in our normal laboratory, which is not here, is that we look at blood volume, and blood volume changes in relation to physiological stimulus. And it's all those that we are looking at to the stimulus to make a determination whether or not somebody's telling the truth. So in this particular regard, polygraph comes through. We will undertake the assessment in relation to this question. We've got another person that's going to be able to have a polygraph examination very shortly. And the issue here is, once we've concluded our polygraph test, so we will determine whatever this stimulus may be. Once you've determined what that stimulus is, did you take the money? Have you been truthful? Have you had an affair? Have you stolen money from work? Have you had sexual offences with whoever? Whatever it might be, it's unlimited, the actual investigations that a polygraph can do. Right? Once the questions have been undertaken, then what will happen is we'll undertake the test. Now today, you'll see, I started to do that, and one of them was going to be, and I've decided against it, because there's too much stimulus in this room. But it would work very quickly. If I sat down and I said to you, and I presented you with numbers from 1 to 8, and I said, circle a number, and you circle the number 6, what would basically happen is, I'd say, did you circle number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? You'd say, no. What have we got? Truthful responses. So we now have a physiological baseline to determine what your body says to a truthful response. In relation to number 6, I'm going to say no. Just say no. Do not say that you circled the number 6. What do we have now? A known lie physiological response to which we can calibrate the unit back to. So what we see here is how the polygraph is working. Now the polygraph best works with law enforcement agencies. Now the polygraph is currently used in 65 countries throughout the world. America alone did 3 million polygraph examinations last year. There are 19,500 police forces in the United States. The FBI, and I'll touch on the FBI because it was mentioned on your Facebook site, alone did 25,000 polygraph examinations. All right, so the polygraph examination is just to assist in the conduct of an investigation, whether it be a civil investigation, criminal investigation, or some other issues relevant to fidelity, infidelity, those kinds of points. All right. Now, of course, I'd like to be able to tell you from my experience, are there more males that appear to have infidelity tests? Are there more females that appear? Do you know what the answer is? I'm not going to tell you. All right. So what we have here now is we have the polygraph that's been hooked up. There are 3 phases. Now, when somebody comes into a polygraph, it's very important that we regulate even the room temperature. Room temperature must be between 24 degrees and 26 degrees, as we know on a hot day, because over 26 degrees, what happens? Our body starts moving into sympathetic nervous system activation. And it's very important what we call you are in a state of homeostasis, that is the state of relaxation, which we can see at the moment. I'm going to tickle him in a minute just to wake him up. All right, so the issue there is we then measure oxygen levels in your blood system. It's very important because I'm looking at your pupil dilation or contraction to make a determination of, are you frightened, not frightened? Have you taken any pharmaceutical medication prescribed and not prescribed? Have you taken any alcohol? Are you interested in what's going on? Those kinds of issues, and they're very important in relation to undertaking a polygraph test. The reason why we take oxygen levels is because if you suffer from asthma, that affects your oxygen levels obviously in your body, and that will explain why your pupils are significantly contracted. Right. So then we look at taking core body temperature. Now we look at the radial artery in the hand and we record the body temperature from the radial artery in the hand. Does everyone know where the radial artery is? Do we have it in our right hand? Or do we have it in our left hand? It is the artery that comes from the heart all the way through, and we have it in our left hand, and it comes through just here. Right? That is why we wear our wedding rings here, because it's directly connected to our heart. Whereas on the right hand, it's not. Right? Body temperature, we record body temperature to determine whether or not somebody is suffering from any kind of illness that's going to cause a fever. Because if that's the case, we probably won't continue with the polygraph. Once a person comes in, they then undertake a significant amount of documentation. But the first one is, which leads into what we're going to talk about shortly, and that is the legality. So they have to walk in, they have to then provide us with information. That information is secured, doesn't go anywhere. Based on that information, we then take the second part, which I already told you about, which is the stimulation test, or the known lie test. If we get responses effectively from both, that person can then undertake a polygraph examination. But you don't just do a polygraph. At the same time that the polygraph's been undertaken, what are we doing? We are reading the body. We are looking for what the body is telling us apart from the polygraph. And then we correlate the both to make a determination as to whether or not somebody is being truthful or being deceptive in relation to them undertaking the polygraph examination. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to connect the polygraph, and I'm going to pump up the blood pressure cuff. And the reason why I've left it down, you don't see it there, is because it's very uncomfortable when it's fully inflated. So I'll probably inflate it now and we'll leave it on for 2 or 3 hours and we'll just see how it goes. Right? If you had that connected, then you would have seen the sympathetic nervous system immediately activate, and the fact that you thought you were going to sit here for 3 hours with an extremely painful blood pressure cuff. All right. So normally we will take this up. We ensure that there's 3 types of readings that the polygraph will produce. One is a reading which is consistent with a deceptive response. The second one is a reading which is consistent with a non-deceptive response, truth, lie. And the third one is inconclusive. All right? So what I'm going to do now what we have, what we're seeing here, is normal breath respiration. So you see here, he's breathing normally. We see the galvanic skin response. There is no heightened or increased perspiration coming from his body because there's no stimulus he's been exposed to at the moment. I'll jump on his foot shortly and we'll see how that works. And what we have here is his heart rate. And his heart rate here is very low, which would suggest you don't have high blood pressure. Is that correct?
I don't know. Maybe you're checking in now.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we have an issue in relation to what we talk about paralinguistics, which is voice activation and the way that they talk to you to be able to determine whether or not someone is nervous, not nervous, and so on.
What just happened to the heart there? It just went berserk.
That's what actually here is actually dropping off the chart. So he's totally relaxed. And all I can say is thank you very much for demonstrating that. Even though it drops off the chart, the computer will still read it.
Well, what's with relation to that psychoacoustic? Because there was earlier in the year there was a failed.
What we have here is talking going on, right?
So what's like? There seems to be a relationship to humour. Like, what's the
Believe me, when we undertake a polygraph examination, there is no humour. There is no stimulus in the room whatsoever. And not only that, you will do exactly what I tell you to, because if you don't, it's just deceptive response. Is there anything else you'd like to do to muck up my charts before we go? Okay, so what we see here, and you can see the difference there is heart changing in relation to the discussions that we're having in the back of your mind. All right, so what you can see, respiration, you can see the heart rate. I'll centre it again. Please don't talk. And we'll proceed. All right, so now you have the 3 instrumentation. And what would normally happen is, and it's not happening on this case because I'm not using it correctly, I'm just doing it to show you how the body talks. And if you can understand what the body's saying to you, you can read it like a book. All right? And what this is telling me is how he's breathing. This is live. That heartbeat took place about a second ago. All right? And his respiration, galvanic skin response, he's nearly going to sleep, we'll have to jump on his foot in a second, those kinds of issues. So what we see here is he is in a state of what we call homeostasis. Now, in other words, he's relaxed. He's in a prime spot to undertake a polygraph examination. What you see here, see the little point there going up? Even though he's been activated here, that little point there was an activation to the phone ringing. All right, so a little stimulus in those particular regards, so you'll see that happening. All right. The interesting part about the polygraph is, in addition to that, we look at issues relevant to body language. So does anyone know how, when someone's talking to you, a prime way to make a determination as to whether or not they're possibly being deceptive? Just from speech. Anyone know? Okay. I'm happy to point somebody out. No, I won't do that. What you might recall, there was an issue about 3 years ago where a young lady, and the American police did the same thing as what Australian police do, and she claimed that her car was stolen. In other words, it was carjacked in a Walmart store, which is like Kmart, all right, and it had her 2 kids in the back. She went to the police and reported the car being stolen with the kids that are gone. Her estranged husband come with her, and they did an interview with the police that was broadcast on television, like we do here in Australia. What the father said was, "I love my children. My children need me. I don't care who you are, take them to the nearest police station, leave them there, no questions asked. I'm not going to ask any questions. Please, my children love me." When she got up to have a talk, she said, "My children loved me." What do we see there? She's talking immediately in past tense. So what does she know? Her children were subsequently found to be drowned, and she knew that they were already dead, which is why she spoke in past tense. Now, I don't want to put a summer in relation to our fantastic presentation today, but what I do want to prove to you is this. Subliminally, you will use conversation that you know. If you're going to say past tense about something, you know it's already occurred. So if you're saying, where is my car, or where are my children, and you're using past tense, you know something's occurred. Right? There's an example of what we use. The use of nouns and pronouns in relation to structure. When we talk about neuro-linguistic programming, okay, a lot of you would know neuro-linguistic programming has got to do with life coaching and those kinds of issues, but it's also used very effectively as one point to be able to determine whether somebody's telling the truth, because of the way you recall memory. Now, when you go home, ask your friends, your partners, your loved ones a question about what did they do yesterday morning, and I'll tell you what they will do. They will go, "Why don't you ask me that question for?" Okay, look, just go along with me. What did you do yesterday morning? And they'll go, or they'll look up. Okay. Now, if a person who is right-handed, statistically, will recall by looking to the left, that is a truthful response. A person who is recalling memory, who is right-handed, will recall by looking at 90-degree angles to the left. A person who is right-handed and is telling about a conversation is looking to the right. You've got to remember that you've got to look at these clusters of behaviours we're going to talk to, but statistically there's a higher probability that person is making something up, and I'll give you an example. What did you do between 3 and 4 o'clock today? Yesterday. So 3 and 4 o'clock yesterday, you were at work. Between 4 and 5 o'clock, you were at home getting ready. Between 7 and 8 o'clock, you robbed the next door neighbour's house. And between 8 and 9 o'clock, you went out. So when you've spoken about what happened, you say, "I was at work, I come home, and then I went out." And what have we done? We've missed the bit in the middle. So these are the issues that the body's talking about in relation to even though it's truthful response, you're lying through omission. All right, so there's some of the aspects in relation to what we're looking at. The other things that we look at in relation to body language is what we call pacifying behaviours. Anyone know what a pacifying behaviour is? We do it all the time, and it was demonstrated here earlier through a conversation that was taking place. What it is that where our sympathetic nervous system's been activated, we automatically go through responses to try and reduce that pressure. And I'll give you some examples about that. How many times, males mostly do this, have you seen a male go, or they'll go, or they'll rub their chin, or they'll rub their eye, or do something? These are behaviours that we are automatically doing to try and bring our body down into a state of homeostasis because we've been stressed by something. Whether it's something we've seen, something we've heard, something we've just been told, or the polygraph machine turning itself off. That will all cause you stress, all right, through inactivity, and I'll come back and talk to you about that in a second. So these are issues. Now when we see a cluster like that of behaviours, a cluster of the use of past tense, the use of a pacifying behaviour, increased respiration. When I talk to people, for instance, I am constantly looking at their hands. I'm looking at their eyes. I want to see whether, as I said before, whether their pupils are dilated or not. I want to look at their blink rate. I'm looking at their respiration. All this stuff I talk to them about, and when I'm talking to them, I'm reading from them, because 9 times out of 10, the body will tell you the state it's in when they're verbalising something completely different. Now you could have your left foot cut off and your mate will ring up and say, "How are you?" "Oh, good, thanks." Because it's an automatic response which we are programmed to say. You're not good, you're bleeding all over the floor, but you're going to say you're good, thanks. All right? So these are some of the circumstances where, yes, we verbalise something completely different to what our body's telling us. In this particular regard, I find that mostly people lie verbally. It is very, very hard to be able to be deceptive through your body and the signals which your body broadcasts. So these are some of the issues. Once the polygraph's been undertaken, for instance, and this is a demonstration of what happens when you leave the blood pressure cuff on too long. So I said you'll leave it there for a couple more hours and just see what happens. You should have told me about that.
I want the blue hat.
Which is why an actual polygraph test takes no more than 3.5 minutes. So 3.5 minutes over 3 charts, and that's probably all that's required. And then what happens, we don't see the vein stand up in the hand fall off because it's had no blood circulated to it for some time. So these are some of the issues that we have. Now, at the conclusion of a polygraph examination, we use a computer program. It's an algorithm program. The issue is it's only about 75% accurate. So we don't use it to make a final determination, but we do use it to be able to determine whether or not somebody is being deceptive. Now, with the program, we can tell from each question whether somebody has been truthful or somebody hasn't been on that question, even though we might have asked 8. All right? So at that point, if the polygraph algorithm program picks up they've been truthful in these responses but not on this one, what are we going to do? We're going to go back and we're going to have a bit of a chat about question number 8 and determine why is it it's detecting that you're not telling the truth. Now, you may be, and I won't know until we hand score and evaluate your chance at the end of the day. And it may be that it's incorrect. I've known it to be incorrect on a couple of occasions, but it's fairly rare. So these are the issues that we do. So at the end of the day, what happens is we produce a report. The report's then given to the examinee, and the examinee can say, look, I've either passed or haven't passed. We don't say pass or fail, we say consistent with physiological response, consistent with a non-deceptive response or a deceptive response. Now, polygraph charts are then used, and we have had an issue where when we first started in 2009, polygraphs were not admissible in court. In some jurisdictions, they're not. In jurisdictions in which the rules of evidence can apply, absolutely. So we're talking about issues of anti-discrimination. We're talking about issues of equal opportunity. We're talking about issues, as you know, of harassment in the workplace, which is normally a power issue. And it's between two people. How do you prove that? How do you prove you're the victim that you've been harassed in relation to that when you've got no evidence? So what happens is you look for the evidence that can be available. This is the polygraph. Polygraph reports can be tendered in evidence in tribunals where no evidence is, where the rules of evidence don't apply. What happened, of course, is that normally courts will not accept any kind of report from any person who's not perceived to be an expert witness. And that is defined within the Evidence Act or the Uniform Evidence Act. Expert witness is somebody who has academic qualifications in the field, 5 or more years of experience in that field, and the courts make it, and they are a member of an association, a credible association, which says yes, a level of attainment. And then what happens is, based on those 3 criteria, the court may or may not say that person, whether it be a doctor or a professional engineer, what it might be, can then give evidence based on their opinion. Now, with Advanced Polygraph, what occurred is that we needed to get over the first hurdle, which is the biggest hurdle we had in relation to the law in Australia, and that is being registered to a credible organisation where there is no such thing as forensic psychoacoustic. So what we need to do to overcome the issues in relation to the law is we apply to the Australian and New Zealand Forensic Science Society, which runs all the police forensic laboratories in Australia. Okay, so all their members are a member of that particular association. You have associate membership, which you probably find with a lot of other associations, and full membership, which are persons who are academically qualified, or in this case, scientists in those fields, whether it be ballistics or whatever it might be. In this particular regard, we applied to be, which is what a polygraph examiner is, a forensic psychophysiologist, and they nearly pulled their hair out. And it took them 9 months to make an evaluation, and they come back and we were approved. So based on those issues and the academic qualifications and so on, we have now been providing evidence in court through affidavits, both in the family court and in lowercase criminal jurisdictions. So these are some of the issues, and in particular litigation issues too. So these are some of the issues where polygraph can be used. In the main, however, it's still going to fall back to the judge to make a determination as to whether or not they'll accept that evidence and how much weight will be placed on that evidence. And that's a very important concept to be able to make a determination.
Is it possible that that like when everyone's actually got a Fitbit on, that they'll be able to have real-time law using, like, because this is essentially an expanded Fitbit.
Well, it's a very good question. No, it's seriously a good question because I'm about to move into the next aspect and I'll take that as a prelude to move into it. The technology's changing. Do you think polygraph's going to be around in the next 10 years? No. Probably next 5 years you won't see this technology. Because what they're moving into now is brain scanning. Alright, so they'll collect a small apparatus in your head and what they'll do is they'll show you a photograph of this environment. And they'll say to you, this is hypothetical, they'll say to you, have you been in this environment? We want to know you're in this environment because Daniel's been murdered over in the corner and we're trying to find out who murdered him. So what will happen is they'll show you photos of this environment. Your brain will, depending on the aspects and location of it, I'm just trying to put it in layman's terms, where the stimulus is activated, it's either activated in the frontal cortex, which mentions that fact that this is a recalled memory, or the interest part of your brain is activated, so you've never been there before and you're looking at this is interesting to you. So the different activations of your brain is going to tell whether or not you've been in that location. If you've been in that location, then all it needs is to determine is where that location, because we all come here today for a fantastic demonstration. Thank you very much. Demonstration of the sympathetic nervous system, freeze, fight, or flight. Or did you come here because you've been a tradesperson, or you've played in here, or you've come to another exhibition in here, or were you because you met a Danny and left your body in the room? So these are issues that we would look at. All right. So the future is not the polygraph. The future is not so much a Fitbit, but it will be an issue placed on the brain to determine whether or not.
And for memory implants as well.
Well, it's very difficult. I'll give you an example about that. We would polygraph somebody who's been charged and convicted of an offence, has been in jail for 20 years, because they're going to say it over and over again, provided that they're not guilty when in fact they may be. So we wouldn't do that, because what they have done is a form of self-hypnosis, where they have constantly reinforced that they're telling the truth. It wouldn't mean that they pass, but what it would mean is that we'll get inconclusive readings. Right, so even though you've done that time and time and time again, we will still pick up the fact that you have not, in this case, been telling the truth, it's just inconclusive. So,
is that what you call a polygraph psychopath?
Right. I noticed you look at me when you said that. Is this. There are some personalities, and mental health is a big issue that we look at for a polygraph as part of the initial assessment criteria. Psychopaths, sociopaths can be polygraph examined. Okay, there are some, psychopaths can't be, sociopaths, and those persons who are very overt in their personalities can be undertaken polygraph effectively. A psychopath can't. Any idea why?
The amygdala is less effective, so the heart rate's not going to jack up.
Yes, and put it in layman terms, what does that mean?
An emotional part of the brain.
Right, and why are they not showing any emotion? Because they believe they're right. Their whole context is, I am here, you're all here to serve me, I am right in everything I do, even if I've done it wrong, there's no use in taking a polygraph, because they feel in their mind they've done right. If we polygraph you in relation to an issue, I'm going to wind up very quickly, in relation to an issue that you're not sure about, and you think, oh, I might have done that, doesn't matter, because your mind's not going to pick up on it, you're not going to respond to it physiologically, and therefore it's not going to come through as being a deceptive response. But if you do know that you did something, and you ask the question on that, whether you did something, the polygraph will pick it up. Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and talk to you today about how the body works. I encourage you the next time you're on the train just to sit down and say, Martin said, I'm remembering now, close my book and watch and look at everyone on the train. Look at the guy in the corner, look at the person over in the far corner. By the next station they'll probably call the PSAs and you'll be arrested. But notwithstanding that, have a look at what they're doing and look at the way in which their body's responding to whatever stimulus they have in front of them. Even if they're reading a book, You can tell a person who's reading a book which is pacifying, nice and friendly, to someone who's reading a thriller, to someone who's reading a scary book, because their emotions change. You'll see people giggle to themselves or laugh to themselves because of the stimulus they're getting from the book.
Is it possible that FaceTime is doing that also?
You can do that. You've got to be very careful because of the lag,
Yeah.
right? But it is possible to do that.
When we're engaging with mobile media, we're
Yep.
actually having our micro expressions
Yep.
registered in algorithms that can predict our behaviour.
Well, and that's a really good question, because you can also now have algorithm programs in place which will pick up, change the eye configuration, change the mouth, micro expression flashes. They'll pick those up and they can be read through an issue such as the utilisation of Skype and those kind of social medias in order to talk real time. Other than that, the best way to be able to determine when somebody is talking to you truthfully or talking to you in a form of deception, and that is through omission or telling you a direct lie, is to simply look at them while you're talking to them. All right? And I'll leave you with this last context, and that is this. Everybody prefers to tell the truth unless they're psychopaths. And the reason for that is this. Because if you tell a lie, what do you need to do?
Remember it.
You have to remember the lie. If somebody is telling me a lie, I am going to elaborate on that lie. So where were you yesterday morning? I was at home. Oh, I was at work. I really know they were at home. Okay, whereabouts at work were you? Oh, I was in Fred's office. What colour's the door handle? What colour's the clock? What did the clock say? And you start asking all these questions, and you create what is called cognitive overload, where they're trying so hard to remember the answers and the lies that they've told you that their body starts shutting down and they start suffering a memory loss. And that's called cognitive overload. And you'll see, sometimes you might see OSI or some of these movies on telly where they try and do that. That is really also fascinating, because it's the body talking to you because somebody's placing them under a significant load. Now, if you're telling the truth, they can sit here all day and tell you what happened, because that's what happened, and you recall it.
What about a situation where there's many people that believe something that's actually an untruth, and there's one person trying to tell the truth, like is it like Plato's cave kind of scenario?
Okay. No, good question. People who believe something's untrue are going to get picked up because they know it's not true. But where the problem is this, and I'll give you another example. And I hate to come back to a legal context, but I'm trying to do it in a way in which you will all understand. So we're outside in the street, and there was 5 or 6 of us there, and it was at night, and the lights are on, and a red car comes down the road and runs into a kitten. All right? I start tearing up. So what we need to do is we need to split everybody up, because we need to determine what it is. So what type of car was it? Oh, it's a Ford, it was a Hog. Okay, split everyone up, because we don't want people, because we are, as humans, try and fill in the gaps, which is why you see police, for instance, separate you all, because they don't want you to fill in the gaps. And then they say, what colour car was it? I don't remember, but it was a Ford, right? What colour car was it? Oh, I think it was orange, right? But I don't remember the make. What colour car was it? Oh, I think it was a Ford, corroboration. What colour car was it? I'm not sure, but I think it was red or orange, corroboration. So by splitting you up, you're all attempting to tell the truth. They're not telling a lie, but they're doing so within the limitations of their memory and what they saw. And I tell you now, if you're a cat lover, you're not going to look at the car. You're not going to look at the lighting. And the reason why I said the lighting, because halogen lighting actually changes an orange car to a red car at night. And you're going to say it's a red car when in fact you're looking for an orange car. All you're going to be looking at is the tabby was a nice little black cat with white paws and blah, 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 because that's your main focus. Right? I told you not to. All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak to you today. I know that I've spoken to you a bit low. I know you're going to go home tonight and you're going to be speaking to your partners and go, what were you doing today? And I will leave you with this, however. It takes years to be able to read somebody effectively to determine whether or not they're telling you the truth. Okay? Don't go home and talk to someone and they go, oh, geez, what are you asking that question for? Aha! Where were you today? Right? Because they're rubbing their eye. Why? Because it's probably sore. Okay, thanks very much. Any questions?
Any questions for Martin?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah.
Any questions? Yes?
So you said that they're hooked up for 3.5 minutes to polygraph.
Yep.
So do you have already existing set of preset questions?
Yeah. No, good. It's a very good question. What actually happens is this. They're actually hooked up for about, let's just say, they're connected to the instrumentation, much the same as we were today, probably for about an hour and a half. But it's not inflated and it's not hurting anybody, okay? It's just sitting there. The actual examination, of which they'll do 3 charts, lasts about 3.5 minutes. Before the person is connected to the instrumentation, they'll come in and say, I want to talk to you about this. Nobody undertakes a polygraph examination unless they voluntarily are prepared to do so. We do not polygraph people who are forced by partners or other people that come in and undertake a polygraph examination. So the issues in relation to what the concerns may be have already been identified long before they're connected to the instrumentation.
Why would a person who intends to lie voluntarily take a polygraph
Because
test?
they're silly. Okay, and in some cases of infidelity, they believe they can beat the polygraph and they don't. Okay. And the first question I say to them is, don't undertake a polygraph examination if in fact you've done what the allegation is. And of those people that we have found where the polygraph has determined them to be deceptive, probably about 80% have come back and actually indicated to me later that in fact they're telling a lie. All right?
It's interesting this, because I mentioned earlier about the cerebellum, and there's theories that the cerebellum's actually got separate cognitive capacities.
Yeah.
It could be that there's like dual processor unit going on. You got the body, which like speaks the kind of cerebrum sort of
Yep.
It's actually got the language.
Yep.
Is it possible to just hook yourself up to this and ask yourself questions?
No. The reason for that is you already know the answer.
Well, but if there's enough of a rift in the psyche.
I've never asked anyone to come forth that has a rift in their own psyche to be able to make that determination. Well, we normally know, because you do know the answer before you start. However, it's not a bad question, and I'll leapfrog into this. They say the polygraph is about 92% accurate. I tell you now, the instrumentation, because it's medical instrumentation, I don't believe any instrument is 100% accurate, but it would be about 99% accurate. The difference between the 8% inaccuracy is in the ability of the examiner to be able to read and interpret effectively what it is they're seeing. So the way we get around that is this. One polygraph examiner will assess the instrumentation. This is after the algorithm program has been utilised. They assess the instrumentation, it takes about half an hour. Sorry, not instrumentation, the charts. Then a second polygraph examiner assesses the same charts without talking to the first one. It's a quality control mechanism, and then we cross-reference it over to see whether they've got the same response. That response is then compared to the non-verbal communication that's been picked up as part of the pre-test, during test and post-test of the polygraph to give an overall finding. We find we can bring it up to about 98% accuracy. Right. Now, there's still 2% accuracy. There are some medical tests out there, ladies and gentlemen, people go and do, that we swear by, that have a 67% accuracy. All right, but yet we still go and get them done. So these are situations that you just be mindful of what it is you want to achieve and speak up to the person, but make sure that the polygraph examiner you're going to speak to, like anyone else, wouldn't go to a doctor who's not qualified. Go and ask them what their certifications, their qualifications are. How long have they been doing it for? Right. What experiences have they had? What papers have they presented? And we produce papers and give presentations at symposiums all the time because it's part of our credibility in relation to the ongoing research and development that we're doing in relation to polygraph. We have looked at aspects of investigative interviewing and question formulation and changed what they do in America to Australia because we find that more direct questioning in relation to the issues give a significant response. We find that placing earphones on somebody, which we do. I didn't do it for today's demonstration, but they'll have these earphones on which go through an equaliser. And the reason for that is, anyone ever had an MP3 and we've been listening to it and it's chain speaker and it's gone through your head and you can hear it go through your head? Same thing. So when we've got these earphones on, what happens is the examiner, when they're speaking to the examinee, they hear them here and not here, which is a greater physiological response to the issues that have been asked of you. So we found that through our research. So you'll find that we will undertake these as part of our everyday research. You are videotaped from the time you walk in to the time you leave. Now, that's undertaken for 3 reasons. 1, cross-reference in relation to visual clues that have been detected in relation to the possibility of deceptive and non-deceptive responses. For litigation purposes, where somebody says something happened when in fact they didn't. And the third one is it's always a good cross-reference for the purposes of our ongoing research. Now, the aspect I talked to you about before is that until we started doing our research, it had never been identified that in a polygraph environment that the sympathetic nervous system would activate in a room temperature above 26 degrees. So there is an issue. We all know we get hot during summer, but there is an issue in relation to controlling the environment for the purpose of undertaking a polygraph examination. That's all come through ongoing research.
Is it just on a legal,
Yep.
just a legal question? Like, I've always been a bit curious as to whether, do we actually own our own bodies, or is it just on loan from the state?
Yes, you know. You own your own body, which is why I can't walk up and touch it,
Okay,
right, unless you give me permission. And the other issue is when you undertake a polygraph examination, you sign a waiver giving away the intellectual rights in relation to the charts that we saw today back to Advanced Polygraph. Right? And we do that for 2 reasons. One is you own the rights legally.
Okay.
The second one is we want to control the privacy in relation to what's going on. And so we keep them and we control that. And then after 6 months, we destroy it. So there is no record whatsoever left. So from a legal perspective, you own your body.
Okay, that's good to know. I feel a lot
Would
better.
you like me to sit on your knee and just talk about that some more? Any final questions before we finish? Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Another round of applause for Martin, Taylor and Ceri Hann.